Gaius Caius Augustus Germanicus, commonly known as Caligula, was a young, impulsive emperor who reigned from 37 AD till 41 AD, a far shorter reign than his predecessors. The young emperor would rule Rome through despotism, leaving future young emperors to follow the same path of megalomania. Gaius Caesar Germanicus was born on 31st August 12 AD at Antium. His father was the great Germanicus, adopted son of Tiberius, whom is described as having an outstanding physical and moral excellence. The military successes of Germanicus gave him a favorable reputation which he hoped would allow his sons to rise to power. Gaius had several siblings, 5 elder brothers and 3 younger sisters, although only 2 of the brothers were still alive at his birth, Nero and Drusus. Agrippina, the mother of Gaius, also known as Agrippina the Elder, was related to Augustus. The family would traverse the empire together to follow Germanicus during his campaigns. Following the death of Augustus, 2 mutinies arose in the means to get higher pay, one in Pannonia and the other more fearsome in the Rhine. Drusus was dispatched to quell the Pannonian legions, while Germanicus went after the latter. After the mutiny was quenched, Germanicus' legionaries, who already liked having the young Gaius around, would joke around with him. One of the jokes revolved around his little military boots, called the caligae, which gave him the nickname Caligula. Caligula had it rough. His father suddenly died in Antioch on 10th October 19 AD of unknown causes. The supposed assassin was Piso, who poisoned Germanicus and committed suicide before the end of the proceedings in his trial. This made Agrippina very suspicious of Tiberius. She too would end up dead with her 2 elder sons in 31 and 33 AD by either starvation or forced to commit suicide. Caligula was spared but had to live with the killer of his family, the current Emperor Tiberius, on the island of Capri. While on the island, he very much thought of avenging his family by slaying Tiberius. One time while Tiberius was asleep, he snuck in with his dagger and attempted to stab him, yet he restrained himself and threw the dagger down. Although he lived in hatred, Caligula hid his emotions well, becoming the heir apparent with Tiberius Gemellus, grandson of Tiberius. Gaius Passienus Crispus perfectly describes the relationship between the two in his epigram to the effect that the world never knew a better slave nor a worse master. On 16th March 37 AD, Tiberius would die supposedly smothered with cloths by Caligula. Macro, the commander of the Praetorian Guard, made sure that Caligula would have no opposition when assuming power. During the will of Tiberius, it was written that both Gemellus and Caligula would be joint heirs. Caligula would nullify this will. His first action as emperor was to bring his family's ashes back to Rome and give them a proper burial in the mausoleum of Augustus. Caligula would make his uncle Claudius a consul, while his grandmother Antonia was granted the same privileges that Livia enjoyed. However, the two did not get along well, and Antonia would die on the 1st of May 37 AD. For the first 6 months of his reign, Caligula would be seen as a virtuous emperor. He abolished treason trials, paid generous bequests to the citizens, and gave the Praetorian Guard a great sum of extra pay. The emperor was so adored that 160,000 animals were sacrificed in his honor. Caligula would suddenly become seriously ill, possibly due to a nervous breakdown. We are told that Caligula suffered from epilepsy in his youth and was inflicted by insomnia, waking up at night imploring for the sun to appear. In October and November 37 AD, he would recover from the illness. This was also the catalyst for his tyrannical reign. His mental state during the illness must have deteriorated, leading him to be suspicious of others. He suspected that Gemellus plotted against him and had the young man killed. Furthermore, Macro would also suffer a fatal fate, as he would be forced to commit suicide. During his illness, Caligula had an enlightenment and saw himself as a god, which is contradictory to his first 6 months of reign, where he refused any statues being built of himself to not be singled out as more important than his senatorial peers. He would command the architects to remove the statue heads of gods and replace it with his own, also wishing to be worshipped as Neos Helios, the new sun. Caligula had three sisters, Agrippina the Younger, Drusilla, and Livilla. He had a close relationship with them, especially Drusilla, who he saw as his favorite sister. Suetonius tells us that Caligula had an incestual relationship with his sisters. However, there was likely no sexual relation between them, as there was a potential rumor to discredit Caligula. Even if the relationships were not sexual, the relationships were very public. Caligula would even treat her as his legal wife, while she was married to Marcus Aemilius Lepidus, who would hold a grudge against the emperor. When she died on 10th June 38 AD, he ordered her deification and announced a mourning period, weeping at her public funeral as if he was a widow. Even though he was considered to be a monster, he did embark on many construction projects, which benefited the Romans. Flavius Josephus tells us that Caligula made improvements to the harbours at Rhegium and Sicily to increase grain imports, which was his most important addition to the Roman Empire. Furthermore, he completed the construction of the Temple of Augustus and the Theatre of Pompey. He also began an amphitheatre beside the Septa. Two aqueducts known as the Aqua Claudia and Aqua Novus would begin during his reign. Pliny the Elder describes it as an engineering marvel. For entertainment, he constructed a large racetrack known as the Circus of Gaius and Nero, with an Egyptian obelisk transported across the sea and erected in the middle of Rome. At Syracuse, he repaired the walls in the temple of the gods. He would build new roads and keep them in good condition. One of his lavish projects was the Nemiships, which are two ships of varied sizes used by Caligula for his pleasure. The largest ship was a floating palace with mosaic floors, marble pillars, heating, plumbing, and baths. They would be the only ships found in Lake Nemi, due to a Roman law stating that the lake was sacred. As such, no ship could sail on it, making it a religious exemption. 39 AD, one of Caligula's bizarre stunts involved a temporary floating bridge built using pontoons stretching for 2 miles across the resort of Baiae to the neighboring port of Puteoli. Caligula would ride the pontoon bridge on his favorite horse Incitatus while wearing the breastplate of Alexander the Great. This outlandish spectacle was to defy Tiberius' soothsayer, Thrasylus of Mendes, that Caligula had no more chance of becoming emperor than of riding a horse across the Bay of Baiae. Well, at least he proved him wrong. Soon he would exhaust the legacy of 3 billion sesterces left in the imperial treasury by Tiberius. Caligula had to resort to confiscating and extorting properties of prominent Roman citizens to fund his extravagant life. New taxes were introduced, including one on prostitution. It was also at the time when the ties between the emperor and the Senate deteriorated. The Senate grew to rule over Rome without the emperor's intermission, as he spent much of the time separated from Rome. During Tiberius's treason trials, many equestrian Romans would be killed who supported the Julian clan. As such, he launched an investigation to reveal the senators who were found untrustworthy. They would be put on trial and killed. Suetonius tells us that Caligula forced the senators to run beside his chariot. So yeah, they hated each other. In fact, Caligula thought of the Senate as so incompetent that he wanted to implement his favorite horse, Incitatus, into the Senate. If only they would stop horsing around. Not long after splitting from the Senate, he would be faced with a conspiracy. Caligula's sister Drusilla was married to Lepidus, who would conspire with the emperor's two sisters. The conspiracy was quickly found. Lepidus was executed while the two sisters were exiled to the Pontian Islands. Caligula was not an ideal husband. His first marriage was with Junia Claudia, who would die in childbirth due to complications, along with the newborn. His second marriage happened spontaneously when he took Gaius Pisa's bride, Livia Orestilia, as his wife, then a couple of days later divorced her and acclaimed that she wouldn't be with another man. For his third wife, he chose Lollia Paulina, wife of Gaius Memmius, the consular army commander, but once again he would discard her and forbid her from ever sleeping with another man. Finally, we meet the fourth and last wife of Caligula, Caesonia, who was neither young nor beautiful, yet the emperor adored her with a passion. The emperor did venture on military campaigns of his own. One of the emperor's ambitions was to conquer Britannia. This endeavor was in vain, as he never landed in Britannia, yet he did not want to go back empty-handed. As such, he ordered his men to take seashells as the spoils of war and march his dissatisfied troops back to Rome. Although the campaign failed, he did successfully annex the province of Mauretania, which was a client kingdom of Rome. It was subsequently divided into two provinces, Mauretania Tingitana and Mauretania Caesariensis, separated by the river Malua. In the same year, Caligula lost much of his support. Another conspiracy was ignited, but was put down before it could cause any trouble, which resulted in the execution of some senators. Another conspiracy was uncovered. This time it was the work of Cassius Carheia and Cornelius Sabinus, officers of the Praetorian Guard. The Praetorian prefect, Aracinus Clemens, and Callistylus, a powerful power official, were involved as well as some members of the Senate. The assassination was scheduled for 24th January 41 AD, during the last day of the Palatine Games. Caligula had the habit of wandering to the bath and getting lunch. As such, they devised a plan to lead the emperor through one of the slim passageways and execute him there. However, the young emperor had gluttoned himself the day before and had a stomach upset, which made him want to go an unusual way. Ultimately, he was persuaded by the conspirators to go into the narrow passageway and be savagely stabbed to death. Carheia was not done. He stormed the imperial palace and killed Caesonia, as well as the emperor's daughter, Drusilla. Ancient sources describe Caligula as a tyrant who killed mercilessly and indulged in sexual activities. This is somewhat true. He was notorious, but not one of the worst emperors as we hear. He was a ticking time bomb, since he suffered so much psychologically in his childhood. He never killed as many Romans as we believe, and those he did were of high status, and most likely killed only due to political reasons. He definitely was terrible with the financial aspect by spending so much in so little amount of time. Some of his decisions, like making his horse a consul, were more likely impractical jokes, since he had a sour relationship with them and thought that a horse was just as capable as a senator. A young man with no military experience being put on the throne was never a promising idea in the first place. So, the emperor was dead, and this sparked a predicament. Who would become his successor? The Praetorians found the answer, and that person was Claudius. When Carheia killed Caligula, he stormed the imperial palace to kill Caesonia and their daughter. Carheia went after others, some of Tiberius's friends, and as such took refuge behind the curtain, trembling in fear that he would too meet the same fate. Luckily, a Praetorian named Gratus found the scared man and proclaimed him princeps. With the fall of a tyrant, we have the rise of a man who was always looked down upon, but not anymore.